Hi, my name is Julie Robbins, and I am the MHA Program Director at Ohio State. Just a little bit about myself that gives you context for my role in our program. I have a practitioner background. I earned my MHA in 1993. I worked for almost 20 years in the field before returning to academics. And I started in my role as program director in 2014, and it was a full-on immersion in competencies and CAMI. Our self-study year was 2015, and then our site visit was in 2016. So I have spent a lot of time working on this, and I'm excited to share my experience. Before I get started about that, let me tell you a little bit about our program, because that certainly impacts how we've structured our competencies and how we assess our progress and use the results. We have a full-time residential program, so the vast majority of our students are full-time with a strong focus on early careerists. So most of the students are either directly out of college or within 2 to 3 years. It's a cohort model, highly structured. We take in 25 to 30 new students each year, and they follow a very, with the exception of some electives in their second year, they follow the exact same curriculum. We also have a summer administrative residency that's required that they take in between the first and second year. As I mentioned, we were reaccredited in 2016, so just recently off of that. And our competency model is designed around our early careerist population, and we have 25 competencies and 4 domains. So we have spent a lot of time in our program figuring out how best to use to assess our competencies and use the data to improve our program. So I'll talk a little bit about that today. You can see on the slide here, I've highlighted 4 different, what I'm calling inputs. These are different ways that we assess our students' competency attainment. Those are fed into a very structured faculty review process. And we use the data to every year to improve our program at both at the program level, but also then to drive student improvement. So I'm going to talk through each of the 4 different inputs, and then I'll also talk a little bit about our review process. So we use the data. The first thing is self-assessment data. As many of you probably know from your own programs, this is it's a pretty limited data source, can be biased, it can be challenging to get students to honestly self-assess. We have found it's useful though, for a really high level directional review. You can see on the left, we look at, this is one cohort, and it looks at we do the self-assessment 4 times a year. So it looks at their progress at 3 different points. I believe right when they start the program, at the end of the first year, and at the beginning of the second year. What you can see is, in general, a trend of improvement, sort of similar pattern across the competencies, which run on the bottom. We also look at sort of every term where we see the gains in competencies, and that's down at the bottom. And that really maps closely to courses. So for instance, if you look at the example that I have, this was at the end of the first year where they took economic analysis, operations, they took strategy, and you can see their biggest gains in competency were in those areas. We compare one cohort to the next, so we can look and see if there's a difference in cohort that might red flag something that's maybe falling through the cracks in the curriculum. But the other really important thing this does is it reinforces the model with the students. So having to assess themselves every year just communicates the importance of the competency model and reminds them what the competencies are and what we're striving for in the program. The next piece of data we get is from the summer administrative residency preceptors. It's part of the evaluation process. We don't ask them to assess all of the competencies, but a subset, which are listed here and observed during the residency. This is a great piece of data. It's in terms of the timing, it's halfway through the program, but it also gives us an objective view and practitioner feedback on our student competencies. And you can see we summarize. We give them a 1 to 5 scale, and then we summarize the percentage that rated the students over 3, so rated them 4 or 5 out of 5. to highlight sort of opportunities to improve. In general, the students do very well, but we have found, so for instance, on this one, financial management is a little bit lower. So we will then go back to preceptors or look at our curriculum to see where we might improve students' financial management skills. We also, so this is how we use it at the program level, but at the student level, we can highlight if there's a particular student that has lower than expected attainment. And again, as we do this year over year, we can compare one cohort to the other to see if, you know, maybe there are cohort differences, or maybe we've had something fall through the cracks in our program. The next source of assessment data is course-based, and this has been a strong area of focus for us, really starting in 2014, and we've worked really closely with our faculty to embed competency assessment in their courses, and we have them reported up through the program at the program level. And so what you can see here is a program level review, and on this chart you can look at on the far left are the domains of our competencies, and then in the middle is a listing of the competencies, and it shows what courses, this is for one semester, shows what courses where they're assessed, and then for a particular measure in the course, what percentage of the students met the competency at the expected level. And so you can see we sometimes during a semester, a competency will be measured in two places. And what we do is we look at the red highlights areas where we had lower competency attainment. We use a threshold of 80%. And as a faculty group, we have all the faculty that teach a particular cohort in a semester meet to review this. And as a faculty group, we will look and see kind of where do we have any common themes, in terms of areas where students aren't meeting the competencies. Are there ways that we can improve how we're building them? A lot of the conversation initially has really been on trying to refine our measures and get measures that are really reflective of the competencies. And some of the ways that we've used this data really are initially to refine our competency definitions to be as clear as we can on what we think is important, to develop our measures. And then also we figured out ways that we might collaborate to build competencies. So as an example, we've started, for instance, in strategy and finance, we cover a competency around strategic and business planning. We now assign a project that's assigned in both courses and coordinate both the assignment and the evaluation of that. We've also developed some common rubrics to improve the consistency with which we evaluate our students, and that has improved our ability to know where our students are, but to communicate effectively with them in terms of developing their competencies. The other level of review on these course-based competencies is to really look at the individual students. And so the chart here shows the competencies this time along the top and where they are measured in the class. And then as you go down, you can start to see on the left the individual students. And so if you look on the far right, we have an individual summary that shows in this semester, 30 competencies were assessed and looks at the percentages of the competencies each individual student met during that time. And that helps us flag individual student needs, and faculty then follow up with the individual student, or as a group, we pay attention to how individual students are doing. The last piece of data, this is in the final term, is we have a capstone course, and it is an integrative course, and so covers several competencies, and we have a faculty and practitioner board that evaluates the student presentations, in which they've worked with a client organization to put together real-life business plans. The board is given a standard evaluation tool that assesses multiple competencies. And really on this one, we consider this a final check for competency attainment. In general, students do very, very well on this. We haven't actually identified any improvement opportunities for this, but it is a good sort of end of program look at how we're doing. And if we were to find any deficiencies at this point, we would go back and look at whether we had missed something during the course of the students' programs. So this, again, is another really valuable objective multi-faculty measure. So just to wrap up, some of the improvements that we've seen from looking at all of these sources is, in general, our faculty have sort of shifted their focus, and this starts with your curriculum matrix, but have really started to winnow out and focus on those competencies that they're actively developing versus those that they're covering. And part of this comes from having to report on all of the competencies in the courses that one is covering. It's really challenged faculty to be as clear as they can on what's being developed. The other improvement is, I mentioned, the use of common tools and rubrics, and the coordination between classes. And then finally, we've identified some common program needs. So for example, in multiple classes, students were struggling with business typewriting. And so we have had several conversations, we don't quite yet have a solution, about how we can, as a program, start to address that. Similarly, we know that we need to embed sort of a focused session on developing Excel skills, which have come up as a need in multiple classes. And so in general, this process has really challenged faculty to engage with one another and have really meaningful, robust dialogue about how we're developing student competencies. And so it's been really helpful to our program and to our students. Some of the success in our process is it's been very structured. Our faculty meet, we put the meetings on the calendar at the beginning of the year, and faculty know they have to participate. The use of standardized tools has been helpful. Faculty, these conversations have really resulted in faculty thinking about the program as a whole. I think I mentioned that, and not just about their own course or as a series of individual courses, but we really have started to see connections. And as a result, these data have been helpful to set a kind of a culture of continuous improvement among our faculty. Not everyone loves it, let me just be clear, but in all, it has really led to more robust conversations about how we work together to develop our students. This is not without its challenges. The course level, for instance, the course level assessment is incredibly time intensive for faculty. There has certainly been pushback. All of the other measurements, we need administrative support to aggregate the data. It takes faculty time to review the data. So it is really time intensive, and we've definitely dedicated significant administrative support to make this happen. Another big challenge is we realize this is hard. Dialing in the measures. What is the right measure of a certain competency? Are we capturing it? Are we measuring what we think we're measuring? Is it useful to student development? And so that has been a challenge, really dialing that in. And then finally, we've been really successful in our efforts to engage our full-time, sort of what I would call our core faculty. We are in the process of trying to bring in our adjunct and practitioner faculty. But as everyone in this room probably knows, there's a lot of education around how to assess competencies, and practitioner faculty are really busy, and we like to be respectful of their time. So we're really in the process of figuring out how we can bring that group in and make sure that they are really participating in our process and adding their perspective, which is valuable to our students' competency attainment. Looking ahead, we'll just continue to refine our process. I think the biggest issue is finding better and more efficient systems for managing the data. And as I'm sure you will talk about in boot camp today, really the next step in the competency assessment journey is systematically sharing the data with students and engaging them in their own competency development process. So that's very much on our radar. I wish I were there to answer questions. Please let me know if there's anything I can do. I know that Dan and Kevin and Eric have my contact information, and I'd be happy to chat with anyone. Thanks.